Welcome to the Productivity Show, a podcast where we believe you can get the important things done without sacrificing your health, family, and things that matter to you. My name is Brooks Duncan from Asian Efficiency, where we help people become more productive at work and in life. And in this episode, my regular co-host Tan is not here. I've got someone much better. I'm super excited to welcome Faye, who is a certified productivity leadership coach, a professional certified coach, and a certified professional organizer. That's a lot of certifications. We're going to get into that. And she helps her clients work better so they can live better. And that, I think, is going to be the through line of this episode, or hopefully that's the way it goes. Ellen is also the author of a book that I really called Productivity for How You're Wired. I promise I'm not just saying that because I have a quote on the back cover, but I'm really excited to finally have Ellen on the podcast. I've been trying to get you on for a while, Ellen, and finally our schedules worked out. How are you? How's it going?
Thanks, Brooks. I'm great. Book's been out a couple months now. I'm really excited to be here and share with your listeners about the book and about productivity and everything that I've learned in the many years I've been doing this.
Yeah, and we'll have a link to the book and any other resources we talk about in the show notes. So in your podcast app, you can just swipe and they should be there, or you can go to theproductivityshow.com and you can find the episode right there. All right, Ellen, I gave you a little certified intro there, but it's always better to hear things in your own words. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about yourself, maybe your background, and how you ended up writing this book.
Cool. I started out, my first career was in the hotel business, and I worked like 80 and 90 hours a week. I learned so much, but I also learned that I can be in control of my destiny and the choices I make about how I wish to live and work. And I loved work in the hotel business. It was always fun and exciting, but it was really not the quality of life I was seeking. So I was like, what can I do? What can I do? My kids were little. I said, I'll be a professional organizer. And I really thought that would be something I'd do a year or two or three till they were older, but it just kept growing and evolving and changing. So I moved from residential organizing, started doing business organizing, and then I became a coach. I certified coach in 2011, and then I backed off a little bit, went on the national board of our professional association, NAPO, which is how I know you, Brooks. That's right. I think we first met in 2013, we were saying. It was cool at a conference in New Orleans.
Yeah, just about 10 years. So that's exciting.
Yeah, it's really nice. Yeah. But great relationships. But I was on the national board, and I finished that in 2018, and I moved to Florida, and I was like, I'm going to start my coaching practice really full force. But I was going up and seeing consulting clients in New Jersey, where I moved from. And then COVID came and I took everything online, and I've had really super focus on productivity coaching. And I say it's really business coaching from a productivity perspective, because most of my clients are business professionals or professional volunteers or professional somethings. So we really need to help them figure out how to integrate productivity, working the way they want with the lifestyle and who they are. So that's how I got here.
Yeah.
The book?
The book. Let's hear about it.
I've had all these ideas all these years, and I kept teaching them. And it's like, one, I want to reach more people with these ideas because I was seeing that they were helping people. And I really wanted to put everything in one place and make it accessible to everyone. Maybe if they couldn't afford coaching, or if they didn't want to coach for some reason, or if they didn't have a chance to hear me speak, I wanted to get my information out to the world. So that is what brought me here.
Actually, I have a question, because I've never written a book myself, but I've known people who have. And what I always hear from people is they say it's the most brutal experience of their life. But then once it's done, they are almost ready to do the next one. So how did you find the process of writing a book? I don't think I've ever asked anyone that on the podcast.
It was the most brutal experience of my life. Absolutely. It was trying to take complex ideas and put them into a very concise sentence that the reader could understand and apply is much harder. I really wish I would have paid more attention in English class. I think if I understood how to diagram a sentence, I would have been a little easier to write it. The ideas were really simple. It was just breaking it, getting the words right, to communicate effectively. I had a lot of support, but it took a long time. And I actually had to cut tons of words. There's another book. I'm calling it Productivity for Leaders. I haven't written it. I don't know if I will. So when I finished this and got this published, I said, I'm not going to think about it for 6 months. I'm not entertaining it. I will reassess in the spring. I do that technique with my clients a lot. Just say, let's take this off the plate, out of our bandwidth for now. I'll reassess later if there'll be another book or not. But yeah, it was brutal.
So you heard it here first, productivity for leaders. We'll loop back in 6 months and see how it's going.
That's right.
So like I said, I really want to dive down on this concept of working better to live better, because I think that is something that I think is really important. But I want to take a little bit of a detour first, because you talked about how the ideas in the book are simple. And this made me think about coaching, really, because the evil secret of productivity, and as somebody who's done probably 200 productivity show episodes by now, but the evil secret about productivity is a lot of times it's pretty simple. We know what we need to do, or at least we know what we should be doing, but it just doesn't happen somehow. And so coaching, I always find, is a fascinating layer to that. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about how you approach that with coaching when you're talking to somebody who, you know what they need to do, they know what they need to do, but it just doesn't happen. Like, how does coaching help with that?
Coaching is the process of helping people discover more about themselves, undo some scripts they've had. So everyone has these preconceived ideas that there is one way to be productive. And there's not. There's as many ways to be productive as there are people and clients. So we have to discover, we have to be scientists about ourselves. We have to be scientists and study ourselves. The coaching process, we may be working on how to format a to-do list or set priorities, but the process provides space for the client to think through and talk through and to process. And then when they think about it in between coaching sessions, they might try some things, experiment, and that's a learning process. Then they come back and I'm going to follow up with them and say, what worked, what didn't work? I didn't do it. Well, why? And then we dig into that. Every single thing that happens provides more information and more clues so that person can figure out for themselves with my support. But if I tell them just do it this way, that's not helping them. So coaching provides a methodology to help my clients figure out their best solutions for themselves.
Yeah, what you said about the scripts is so true, because and people are almost apologetic in a way, because there's so many productivity sacred cows, I guess. People are almost apologetic. They'll say, "Oh, I'm sorry, but eating my frog," which means doing your biggest thing
Right.
first thing in the morning, it just doesn't work for me, or I just can't wake up at 5 a.m. and
Right.
and there's these things that people feel like they should be doing, and that's one reason why and I told you this when we first talked about the book. I was so happy to see that you wrote it, because it just fits this topic exactly. I'm becoming more and more cranky about this. People who listen to the podcast for a while will probably have noticed that this concept of trying to adopt somebody else's productivity system, whether it's eating your frog, whether it's waking up at 5 a.m., whatever it is they feel like they should be doing, it might work for a while. You might get some initial gains, but it's probably not going to stick. So maybe you can talk a little bit about some of these things you've seen with your clients. Hopefully people aren't apologetic to you like they are to me, but what do you do with people who have these scripts
Right.
or have been trying to shoehorn into systems they read online or whatever?
Wow. So people say, I just need more discipline. And I'll
Mm,
say, perhaps we just need a system that fits you, right? And I tell a story in the book of a client who got diagnosed with adult ADHD, and the doctor said, you must wake up. You must exercise first thing in the morning. She had a public relations firm. She worked from home, and I'd been working with her for a while, and I knew she wasn't a morning person. So I said, let's just test this. We created a test, and I had her journal. She loved to write, so it was a good fit for her. So we did a 4-week test. How many times did she exercise at 6 in the morning? Then we tried noon, then we tried 4, and then we tried 7 at night. So those were all her ideas. And it turned out she didn't ever wake up that early. She was not a morning person. And she couldn't stop. She just was getting into flow, and noon wasn't working. And 7 o'clock, she wanted to spend a little time with her husband watching TV before she went back to work. She did really good deep writing later in the evening. But the 4 o'clock worked because she could stop. The phones had slowed down, the emails had slowed down, and she could stop, exercise, help her husband with dinner, feed the family, have family time, and then go back to work. So she was able to link it to something, but it was a system that fit her. And she stopped listening to everyone else and really dug in to what worked for her. So I'm a big fan of simple systems, because we're so busy. We should not be killing ourselves managing our productivity systems. If they're the right system, they're not so hard. They may be a challenge. We might have to practice them. We may have to put in support so we start practicing and doing it over and over. But when the system's right, it's just not so hard. When the system fits.
I love what you said about being a scientist. And I think that fits in exactly with that example you gave, because I think a lot of times when we have something we're trying to do, whether it's exercising, whether it's journaling, you gave that as an example. Some people say they try it but struggle. Maybe it's planning or weekly planning or whatever. And a lot of times we try it and it doesn't work. And we're just like, that just doesn't work for me. And it's so hard to take a step back and do that scientist stage where like experimenting and trying different things. Like we feel like we're not being productive because we're not doing the thing. We're trying to figure that part out. I don't know. I love that reframe of being a scientist. I think I might steal it too, because
Sure.
people just have this. It's almost like they need permission to experiment and try different things. So I love that.
So that is a through line in the whole book, is it gives you ideas and different things to try and different scenarios for different kinds of people, and really pushes that idea is just not one answer. That let's put the information together, let's assess it, let's try, what worked in the past. Such a great clue. And how can we come up with something to connect it to what we're trying to accomplish now? And this is what we're experimenting and figuring out how we can be our best selves.
You mentioned that client who had been diagnosed with adult ADHD, and this is actually a question we get a lot. And I'm always into about this topic because it's not something I have personal experience with. It's not something I'm trained in or anything like that. But it sounds like you've had experience working with clients or maybe people who either have been diagnosed with adult ADHD or maybe they suspect that there's something going on there. I don't know if you're trained or licensed or whatever in this topic, but do you have any things that have worked with clients who at least identify as having ADHD?
Sure. So I would say most people think they have some ADHD. Everyone at some point says, I've always wondered. Now, there are psychotherapists that if you want to get a diagnosis, you go and see a medical professional, and they will ask you the questions they need so you can know. Some people find it very freeing and, I finally understand. Now it all makes sense. Other people are just curious and they say, well, so when a client says to me, should I find out? If they want to know, yes, absolutely. If they just want to come up with systems and processes to support them, we're going to do that. So my methodology is the same for someone with ADHD as with somebody who's just hyper stressed and over anxious or over busy or approaching burnout, because they affect the prefrontal cortex, the executive functioning. So that overstress, that burnout, that super busy, always stuck on, does the same thing to the brain as ADHD. So the difference is, if you want to medicate, if you are diagnosed with ADHD and want to medicate, absolutely go see a doctor. try different medications and see if something helps you. So when I did my coach training, Ari Tuckman, ADHD expert, I took a couple courses with him. And he says that if you take medication and it helps you, you have ADHD. And if it doesn't help you, you probably don't. So that's what Ari Tuckman says. But my methodology working with clients is pretty much the same. I will give more attention towards sleep, diet, and exercise, creating those physical conditions to keep your brain engaged with a client with ADHD. Those are really core. The rest of us benefit from that, but ADHD really takes over if you're tired, if your nutrition isn't good, and if you're not moving your body.
Yeah, it's funny that when you were saying that, it made me think of an episode I recorded quite some time ago with two fellow NAPO members who I know you know, Jennifer Lava and James Lott Jr.
Yes.
Had them on the podcast quite a while ago, and I'll include a link in the show notes to that episode. And what we were talking about is being productive when you have a chronic fatigue or illness or something like that.
Sure.
And I know that's not the same as ADHD, but what you said is the same, which is a lot of these productivity tools that we use and we teach, it's all the same thing for those situations as well. Simplifying, having a goal for the day, all that type of stuff. This stuff is very universal. It just, sometimes you need to tweak it a little bit, but the general tools themselves are universal.
And the issues and the challenges are universal. It's just that the solutions are all individual. Yeah.
That's actually a great segue to the next question I was going to ask, which is we've been talking about how you can't shoehorn people into a productivity box. There's no universal productivity setup or structure or tools or whatever. Everybody's different. Everybody has their own productivity style. But then I guess that raises the obvious question is if you are reading your book or working with a coach or listening to a podcast or something like that, and you accept that different tools and strategies work for different styles, how do you find out what your productivity style is? How do you make those determinations?
Sure. So I will just say that the things I do with my clients, I included all of that in this book so that the reader will have that same experience as much as possible in a book. So the first section of the book I call Understand. And it's really about learning about yourself. So I explain the methodology I figured out because I love to observe things. I love to look for patterns and trends and make connections. It's just how my brain works. And 20 years of working with people, it's like, oh, I see this connection. I see this connection. So I have two things I talk about in chapter 2, and I explain how I came up with it. I explain the research from the human behaviorists who I've grabbed a little bit of information from this one and from this one and this one, and I put it together. So the core of this is you are going to answer some questions and go through some tools that I've included in the book and come up with what I have called structure preference. How much structure do you, as an individual, need to be your best self and to do your best work? Some people need high structure. Some people need moderate. Some people need low. And then I talk about sometimes if you're a little bit like this, you might need moderate high or moderate low. And I give examples for you to start discovering more about yourself and understanding more about yourself. Please, I want your listeners to really get that this is simply a starting place and an opportunity for them to learn about themselves. Because the last thing I want to do is pigeonhole anyone in or put a round peg in a square hole or a square peg in a round hole. That doesn't serve anyone. But if you start thinking about who am I and what do I need? What are my conditions for success? Then you could say, oh, I don't need to be as structured as that person. Or when you have a partner or a boss or somebody saying, oh, do it this way, you now understand why their way isn't your way. So we define structure preference. And from there, I drill down into 4 different productivity styles: my name's diplomat, catalyst, coordinator, innovator. Then you read about, oh, am I an innovator or am I a coordinator? And you could read the descriptions and you see yourself. And that gives you guidance as how much structure you need so you can really get a feel of where to start when you're experimenting. Section 2 of the book is my productivity flow framework, which takes you through the process that I've developed and I have online tools. It's really easy for a reader to figure out how to apply this to themselves and to do it. But at the end of every chapter, which every chapter has a different theme, is it getting clear on priorities and setting goals, or is it figuring out how to use your time, or setting up your winning conditions and your guardrails or your boundaries for yourself, or how you do a time list, or how you do planning? Every one of those chapters, it says at the end, there's a chart. If you think you're low structure, try this. If you think you're moderate structure, try this. And if you think you're high structure, try this. So you have a tangible starting place. So you have a chance to figure out how you're wired and how you work best.
You mentioned the 4 styles: diplomat, catalyst, coordinator, and innovator. You don't have to go through them all in detail or anything, but do you have like just a high level description of what each of those might be, just so people
Yeah.
can
Yeah. So I'm going to tell
self-identify?
you the work style. So in the
Mm,
book, I talk about their work styles. So the diplomat is really relationship, and their style is going to be ready, aim. Hey, everybody on board? Did we think of everything? Everybody good with this? Aim, aim. Okay, I'm going to check it one more time. Fire. Now, the catalyst, brilliant ideas, always moving, really fast paced, ready, fire. They have to slow themselves down so they're not making mistakes, so their time isn't being wasted, even if it's just a little bit. So they think things through a little bit, so they aim a little bit and then they fire. Coordinators are very steady. There are admins, there are bookkeepers, they are CPAs, ready, aim, fire. They're the people that we count on to check things off and get things done. Meeting planners. The innovator is a more strategic thinker, but they get caught up in analysis paralysis. So that is me. And I did it with the book. I do it with everything. Ready, aim. Did I get everything right? Did I cross all my T's? Did I dot all my I's? Okay, I'm ready. Aim. Let me check one more time. Let me read it through one more time. Fire. So those are the styles. And I think people can really identify with those and say, oh, that's me. So that gives you just more clues to understand yourself.
yeah, I guess a value of knowing your style is knowing when you're, I don't know if falling into the trap is the right phrase, but when
Yes.
you're when you're exhibiting behaviors of that style. And if you're an innovator and if you know you're an innovator, for example, and you're just dragging, you think, okay, I gotta just I gotta just put in a guardrail and go for it. And if you don't know that, then you might not even realize what you're doing. So I guess that's a benefit of identifying.
This is about leveraging your strengths. And you're right. I've had to learn to just read the email once and hit send. It is a low value task. If my emails were perfect, all I do is emails, right? So low value task, read it once, hit send. So I've had to teach that innovator self to let go of that.
When you were talking about structure preference, it reminded me of this thing I saw on Twitter once, which Twitter is going through a moment right now. But
Yes.
I saw on Twitter quite a while ago. And to paraphrase, it basically said there's 2 types of people in the world: the ones who load the dishwasher like Tetris and everything's organized, and the people who just throw the dishes into the dishwasher. And the law of the universe is that those 2 people will marry each other. And
Absolutely.
yeah, uh,
Absolutely. Or try
and,
teaching your kids to love the dishwasher, right?
yeah, trust me, the struggle is real, definitely. But it made me think of structure preference. Do you have any tips for if 2 people are of different structure preferences have to work together or live together? Or I could see some potentials for conflict there. Do you have any tips for once you your structure preference for meshing with other people with maybe different ones?
Yeah. So I would just hand my partner chapter 2 and say, hey, read chapter 2. But it's about not only understanding yourself, but understanding those you live with and work with and sharing that information and saying, hey, I thrive with moderate structure. This is how I'm my best. Why don't, it sounds like you might thrive in high structure. How can, if we understand that about each other, we might be more tolerant, we might be more accepting. But what I think is beautiful about it is that high structure person has different gifts than the moderate structure person or the low structure person. And you really need each other. On a team, if everyone was the same, we wouldn't do great work. So we need different types of personalities or different productivity styles to really come up with best solutions. So if I have somebody in my life who's moderate structure, they push me to get out of my own way and they make me better and they help me be more creative. Whereas that is moderate structure, I might help them get things out the door or help them execute in a different way than they would have. So if we look at it as a difference, then that might be frustrating. But if we look at it as a tremendous strength and gift that we have different skills and together we're better, then all of a sudden we could be moving in a much more positive way.
Oh, I love that. It's like a reframe. Look for those points of conflict and flip them around and look for opportunities for help. That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right. So I mentioned in your intro that you help clients work better so they can live better. And when some people hear that, what they might think is those dreaded three words that we all that we're all afraid of, which is work-life balance. It's something that everybody wants, but do you think work-life balance is something that's even achievable? And if it's not, what do you recommend for people who are wanting to basically make their life better?
Sure. So there's that great Betty Friedan quote. There's that great Betty Friedan quote that she says, you can have it all, you just can't have it all at once. And I heard at a NAPO conference, Krista Clive Smith in 2011 said, you don't want to go for balance. That's so hard. But think about it more like harmony. So if you're listening to a symphony, sometimes the strings are louder, sometimes the brass is louder, sometimes the percussion is louder, sometimes it's all loud, and sometimes there's rest and it's quiet. And that's how life is. Sometimes work might be louder, or sometimes if you're training for a race, exercise yourself might be louder, or on vacation, you want it all quiet. So if you look at it that we're going for harmony, it's not always going to be static and the same, but at different times, different things will be louder. Then we can be more accepting of the challenges and the harder times because we know there'll be other times. It's really hard to get it right all the time. When I coach my clients around their priorities, we look at it from a very holistic perspective, their whole life, not just their work, their family, their self-care, their relationships, their personal growth, their work, all of those things come together. And I think it's really important to understand that we don't focus on productivity so we could be more productive. That's not the end point. The end point is so we enjoy our life more. So these are all things we can do so we can become more effective with our work, keep it in proper perspective, put the guardrails in when we need them, know what we're saying yes to, know what's important. So then when we're not working, we don't have to worry about work, and thus we enjoy life more.
Yeah, I love that. It's the goal is not to be checking off those boxes on your task management list or whatever. It's what you do with the rest of the time. Yeah, that's fantastic. You mentioned the P word, so I'm going to jump on that. You you mentioned how you help your clients with their priorities, and I feel like there's multiple levels to priorities, right? There's what you were talking about. There's like the priorities in your life and work and your kind of like big picture priorities, but there's also going down a level when you're starting your week or when you're sitting down at your computer or whatever it is you do during the day. There's figuring out what you should be working on now and what you can work on now and that type of thing. And people, one thing we hear a lot, I don't know about you, but we hear a lot is people really struggle with their prioritization. Like, how do I decide what to work on? So when you're helping clients or do you, in general advice, how do you help them figure out what they should be working on at any given time?
So I have a whole different system. I have changed up the to-do list, and I figured this out from working with people for how long I started 2001. So we're on like 21 years of helping people manage their to-do lists. And I see the same mistakes, long, long lists that they just keep copying over and copying over, and everything's important on that list. And we always, our profession, we say when nothing's important, everything's important. When everything's important, nothing's important. So those big long lists that they copy over, it's just a waste of time. So I teach a methodology of organizing your to-dos by level of priority. So the metaphor I share with my clients is when you unload the dishwasher, you don't take the silverware and spread it all over the counter and then put it in each slot. You stand in front of the utensil sorter and you put the spoons in the spoon slot and the knives in the knife slot. So you're sorting and grouping at the same time. And that's what I teach my clients to do. And there's all kinds of tools. I've got a whole chapter 10, I think, on it. I have a whole chapter that outlines this methodology. But here it is. You sort your tasks in 4 buckets. Now, 4 buckets is moderate structure. If you're high structure, you might want more. If you're low structure, you might just be now and later. But I'm going to give you the main ones that we work from. Critical. These are things I have to do today or tomorrow. There are no options. These are the things that must get done. Hot are things that need to be done in the next few days. Some like to think of it as this week. If you do your planning at the beginning of the week, here's the things I have to do this week. And if I don't, there's a consequence. What's the consequence? I miss an opportunity. I'm embarrassed. I let myself down. I let somebody down important to me. I disappoint my manager, we lose money. There is a consequence. Then everything else needs to be done sooner or later. So you put it in the sooner column or the later column. Now, this is a methodology. It's always method first, tool second. And there's lots, this can be applied to every single tool out there. And in the book, I give you a Google sheet. I show you how to do it on paper. I provide online tools. So if you want to print out the sheet to do it, you can get it. If you want to do it in a Google sheet, you can do it that way. And I show tons of pictures about different planners, different apps, different team tools. But it's the methodology of organizing your tasks by critical hot. That's where my focus is on for now. That's what I'm going to extract my today's work from. And if that's where you focus this week, when I do my weekly planning next week, I'm going to look at my sooner or later, and I'm going to move those up as need be, or down, or off. And then when something comes, I sort it and directly put it in the right bucket. Is it critical? Is it hot? Is it sooner or is it later?
What do you recommend somebody does if, let's say, and maybe this happened to you, I guess the hotel industry is super reactive, so I'm sure this happened to you. If maybe somebody's manager, I hope they work in corporate or something, their boss comes to them and says, "Hey, I need you to do X." And then maybe the next day, so they're like, "Okay, that's my priority." And then the next day, their boss comes to them again and said, "Hey, I need you to do Y." And there's a conflicting priority, and maybe they feel like they're not really sure what to do. What do you do in that situation, or what do you advise people to do in that situation
I
when there's
advise
conflicting?
people,
Yeah.
I advise people to ask their boss to say, I am not competent enough to understand and make this decision. And not, I don't know what my job is, but I want that boss to understand that time is finite. So I am teaching my clients to manage up. Time is finite. Hey, Bob, can you tell me, you told me that this was my priority and this is my priority. Now you're saying this is my priority. I just want to be clear that you want me to do this today and not this. Because Bob's walking around thinking, I could just pile all that work on that person, they're going to keep doing it. But you could only do so much. So I want my clients to train their managers to understand priorities as well. And if you go to them with it in a very concise statement, they're going to think more of you because I want you to communicate to your boss that I want to be sure I am doing exactly what you want me to do. So I'm spending my time on the things that you think are most important, as opposed to I'm not capable to make my own decisions.
Yeah, I think that it all comes down to wording, right? Or framing. If you're coming to them with the frame of that, it sounds to them like you're trying to get out of stuff, that is not going to go well. But if you do it exactly the way you said, which is, hey, I need your guidance on this priority, then I think it can go well. I think a lot of times, a lot of us are assume that the person above us won't be receptive to this. But I think, at least in my experience and from the experience of talking to people, they actually want to know. A lot of times people forget, right? They're reactive too, right? They'll say, hey, do this. The next day they'll do that and forget about the thing the other day. And it's the more you can involve people in those decision making, I think the better it goes for everyone.
That whole collaboration is really what the human behaviorists are finding make for the most productive teams. Real proven results. The Gallup Workplace Study has proven results that collaboration, engagement, psychological safety produces higher profits, higher productivity, more results, lower turnover. So helping your boss be a good boss really makes everybody win.
So my co-host Tan has been going on a lot of other people's podcasts lately. And from talking to him, the biggest thing he gets asked about by far is email. Everybody wants to know about email. Everyone wants help to email. And it sounds like you work with a lot of maybe business owners or corporate people in corporate. And for them, I know, especially people who work in corporate, email can be a big challenge because everybody's emailing all the time. So is that something that you have helped people with? And if so, do you have a way you help people with email, or is it just forget about inbox zero, just shut down Outlook and ignore it?
So I do have a methodology, and I do have a chapter that gives a lot of pictures and a lot of examples. But if you're happy with the way your email is, I'm not going to tell you to follow my methodology. If you don't feel stressed from your email, don't follow my methodology. If you don't worry about missing something, then keep doing what you're doing. But if you're worried, if you've dropped the ball, if you've missed important things, then I want you to do this with your email. So first of all, take out everything from your inbox that is not actionable. I believe that your inbox should serve as a backup to-do list, a second to-do list, in addition to your task list. So I know a lot of people don't believe that, but I've done this with enough clients and they've said, oh my gosh, it's changed my life. I had one pre-reader who's a professional organizer and coach, and she said, I thought I knew everything about email. The chapter on emails like changed my life. It's worth the whole book. So get everything. If you don't need it in the future, delete it. If you want to keep it for future reference, move it into Outlook, a file, Gmail, and label. I call them folders, so we're on the same terminology. It could be one folder. Just call it past emails, reference emails, whatever you want. But move it out of your inbox. You could search just as easily in the past emails folder or do a whole global search. Things have changed so much. The search is so strong. You could find anything. So, and I tell people just to clear email amnesty. If it's more than a month old, just do massive moves of data of old emails and get it out of your inbox. So then you're left with the most current stuff. You could sort by sender and purge more. You could sort by subject and purge more. But then I want you to organize it by priority. In Outlook, I'm going to show you how to use categories to organize. In Gmail, there's some other tools you can use. They're not as effective in Gmail, but it's still, you're only left with a few. Create a queue number. How many? What is my comfort zone? When I exceed 100 emails in my inbox, that's my queue that I need to attend to it, or whatever that number is. Some people are fine with 250. Mine is, I want it all on one page. So I make it very condensed. I take out the preview because I have my preview panel. And then I could have maybe 40 emails on one page or 35, and I could see everything and understand it. I also use those categories to prioritize. So I have people triage their email, set priorities. Is this today? Is this week? Is it sooner? Is it later? Is this just, am I waiting for someone to get back to me? So let's get it out of my key area and get in, and just don't let it clutter it up. So I don't have to read it over and over again. When somebody comes back, I could go find it in my waiting group. So it's a pretty detailed, structured methodology. It works for people who don't like it the way it is now.
I like that concept of having a threshold for when you start to like really go hard on organizing your inbox, because then you're not constantly trying to get to some inbox zero or whatever, but you're also not letting it go out of control. It's just having some sort of threshold, whatever that means to you, to take action. I had never thought of that before. I like that.
Yeah. So inbox zero is really good for high structure people who know they will go back and check whatever they put into their subfolders. But my clients, once it's out of their inbox, it never crosses their mind again. So we want it to fit who they are and make it work for them.
All right, since I have you on, I'm going to take advantage of two of your certifications that I mentioned earlier. And the first one is the Certified Productivity Leadership Coach. And the first one is the Certified Productivity Leadership Coach. And I was just thinking, what would you do or how would you advise someone in a situation where maybe they've worked somewhere for a while, maybe they're in a supervisory or management capability, or maybe they just wanted to get there and they're just having trouble taking that next step up for leadership, whether that's literally a step up to a new role or just taking more responsibility. If somebody has maybe fear of stepping up, how would you help them do that?
What happens a lot in the hotel business, what happens a lot in the hotel business, we called it the magic name tag. So somebody's good in their position and they get a name tag that says manager, and all of a sudden they're supposed to learn how to manage. They know that through osmosis, and it doesn't work that way. So if somebody better position, I'm going to just help them educate themselves. Okay. So chapter 14 and 15 in my book are all about leadership. Chapter 14 talks about creating a really healthy work culture so people feel safe and can stay in their thinking, productive brain and really produce good results. So it's more cultural. But chapter 15 is skills. So many people are just, I assume you know how to delegate. I assume you know how to follow up. I assume you know how to run a good meeting. So these are supervisory development skills. I'm sure you could take courses on Coursera or any number of places, but just hone your supervisory skills, your management skills, which are different than leadership skills. Leadership is about motivating and inspiring people to follow you or work towards a common goal or outcome. But we step over these management skills of how do I make decisions? How do I effectively deal with conflict? So read a book, listen to a podcast, educate yourself. It's not mysterious. One can be better, but it's like anything. To be better, you need to provide yourself with some support and some services to be better. And also, and I just have to say, people are different, just like you're wired with your productivity, different leaders are good at certain things. So if you're a team builder, that's great. Don't expect yourself to be checking off boxes as much. And if you're a box checker and a planner, Don't expect to be in the people space as much or to be great at sales. Know who you are, do what you do well, and leverage that to be and use that in your leadership and in your management.
Yeah, if you work in a larger organization, your HR department might have resources, might have courses, but a lot of times they only happen at certain times of the year. And you might be in a leadership role for 6 months before having access to doing these things. So I think you're right. It's all about being proactive and actually searching this stuff out and not just assume you're gonna pick it up.
Like that last chapter of the book hits all the key areas. There are books on each one. There's books on making decisions. There's books on managing conflict. There's books on leading effective meetings. There's books on all of those managerial skills. But like this, it just gives you an overview, and then you could say, oh, this is an area that I want to hone some skills in, and I can go do more research there.
All right. The other certification I want to take advantage of is Certified Professional Organizer. And I know you've been on HGTV a while ago, which makes you famous in my book. So do you have any tips for setting up an effective workspace? What should people be focusing on? What's not worth focusing on maybe, or what mistakes do people tend to make?
I always urge my clients to think of themselves as a fighter pilot flying a fighter jet, right? There is not a lot of space. So we only want the things around us that we use all the time. If you use it once in a while and you have to look at it every day and move it every day, you're wasting your time. So find other locations for that. When people are working from home, set up a really tight space with a few things you use. If it's a pen or a pencil, a couple different sizes of Post-its, a couple Sharpies, whatever you need. I am the hugest fan of a second monitor. I think that just boosts productivity exponentially, that you have more desktop space to work on, and you can be looking, like I have my calendar over here, I have other notes over here, I have us over here, but I'm just looking at you. And I do that with my work. So I love the second monitor. Have everything you use all the time right here. And if you don't use it every day, it should not be on your desk, and put it right behind you or in a drawer. If you're working from home, take the time to set up your technology. Take the time to set up wherever your primary workspace is. Have those things that support you close by, and then make a drawer. Even if you're sitting on the sofa in the family room, make a drawer for those backup supplies so you could get your hands on them. Some of my clients have on their weekly planning list, and all of my lists, they're customized to that person. So I'll give them a menu of options. I say, when you go into a restaurant, you don't eat everything on the menu. You pick out the ones you want. That's what we do with my lists for daily and weekly planning. But part of that weekly planning for some people is to clear your desk, put your pencils back in your pencil cup, and get a clean slate to start the week. Close out the extra windows on your desktop so you are not wasting resources, so you're focusing on what's new for the week. So that all gets incorporated. So it's both digital and physical.
Love it. That's pretty actionable, but I want to give you an opportunity to give another action item. We always like these podcasts to be actionable. That's something part of our brand promise. And so we always want to end each podcast on an actionable note. So if you want somebody, other than organizing their workspace, if you want somebody to take some sort of action tomorrow or even today, what would you like people to do after listening to this podcast?
I want you to organize this week's tasks into your 4 categories. Critical, I must do it today. Hot, I'm going to do it this week. Everything else goes to sooner or later, and try it. You could do the method with the tool you're using now, but I want you to try it, and I want you to see if you feel better.
All right. We will have, like I said, the link to the book Productivity for How You're Wired in the show notes. But Ellen, thank you so much for being here. If somebody wants to learn more about you and what you do, where's the best place online to go and track you down?
Thanks, Brooks. The best place is my website, ellenfaye.com, ELEN, F as in Frank, AYE.com, and you will find everything out you want to know about me.
Fantastic. And so, like I said, we'll have a link to everything at theproductivityshow.com. So thank you so much, Ellen. Really appreciated you being here. And thanks everybody for listening. And we will see you next Productive Monday.